Hey everyone, welcome to the Nursing Insights podcast. My name is Stephanie and I'm a registered nurse practicing in the state of New Jersey. Getting right to it, the state of healthcare right now is tough, to say the least. Let's just say that the nursing shortage does not spark joy. We can sit in that and stew in it for a while, but we can't live in it forever. Things are changing. So join me as your host as I partner with the New Jersey Collaborating Center for Nursing to hear from nurses across the state about their experiences, trials, and triumphs in the nursing profession. This is the final episode of our 3-part series on the 2024 New Jersey Nursing Summit. Let's get started. Today, we have MaryJo Loughlin on the podcast. MaryJo is the Chief Nursing Officer and Senior Vice President of Patient Care Services at Hunterdon Healthcare System. She holds her Doctorate of Nursing Practice and also serves as the President of the Organizations of Nurse Leaders of New Jersey. MaryJo, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about your journey in becoming a nurse?
Absolutely. So when I graduated high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And my parents said that college was an option, but I needed to know what major I wanted to major in. I went to college in Raritan Valley, and I was in the major of hotel restaurant management. I was taking one of my prerequisite classes, and there was a group of women. They had gone back to school for their second career, and they were studying anatomy and physiology. And I thought, this is fascinating. And when they told me their major was nursing, I went home and told my parents I was going to change my major. My parents said, you never talked about being a nurse. So they felt that I should go to LPN school. I transferred then from the county college to the LPN program in my local community, and I became an LPN. I loved being a nurse. It was just that immediate connection, and I knew that I was in the place that I was meant to be. I started here at Hunterdon Medical Center as an LPN, went back to school to obtain my associate degree, become an RN, my bachelor's, my master's, and then during the pandemic, I completed my doctorate. I started out as a bedside nurse here. As that LPN, worked as a staff nurse as an RN, then became an evening off-shift nursing supervisor. I then progressed into a management role, nurse director, administrative director, AVP, vice president, and then became the chief nursing officer 3 years ago. So I share that story with all of you, first of all, because I think it's kind of cool, but I think it shows how you can really build on your career. I never had to give up my career. And that's one thing that as a nurse, you should really value and appreciate, because there are things that happen in our lives. Maybe you get married and you have children. And I could always flex my career, my time to be able to still be in nursing. So I've worked full-time, part-time, per diem, evenings, nights, and I never had to give up my career. So I have many friends that had to give up their career, go back 10 years later and lost all of that traction, right? And lost all of that knowledge, and then never really got to the level that they would have in their career if they didn't take that little break to raise their family. And as a nurse, you don't have to do that. It's fantastic.
One of the many benefits of being a nurse, aside from the fantastic work, the patient care and impact, like all of the above. Thanks so much for sharing your journey. And one of the big kind of pieces of that journey that you've mentioned is being in mentorship and being a leader of people. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey in mentorship?
So this is true story, very interesting. My chief nursing officer at the time, her name was Linda Rush, who was just at my son's wedding. She has been my mentor my whole career. She brought me to one of the first Organization of Nurse Leaders meetings. It actually was called the Organization of Nurse Executives. So it was a very bougie, short sort of meeting with high-level CNOs. And I'm a young nurse, and I walk into this room with these powerful women. It was amazing. And they had all of us stand up. We were doing a little exercise, and they asked everyone of a certain age to sit back down. And in this group of 50 very strong, powerful women, there were 2 individuals standing up, myself and another young new nurse. And they said, this is the future of nursing leadership in New Jersey. What are you going to do about it? And we were all in awe. And my first reaction is, don't leave me holding the bag here. Like, this is, we need some sort of plan. And in nursing, historically, we weren't good at succession planning. For me, myself, I explained my career. When I became that nurse manager, I was a strong clinical nurse. They handed me the keys to the office and said, you're a nurse manager. No mentoring. I was overwhelmed. Fortunately, I was in the organization. I had relationships and built relationships, and I relied on people and trusted them, to ask questions and not feel like, I didn't know the answer, or that I was stupid, or someone was going to judge me. Just like when you're training as a new nurse and you're transitioning into practice. So it wasn't the ideal experience. So at that ONL meeting, the Organization of Nurse Leaders meeting, when they said, what are you going to do about it? We said, we need to create a mentorship committee and we need to focus on what we're going to do. And that's exactly what we did. So in 2010, and I was all in then because I had this experience and I knew that I could have had a much smoother transition into leadership had I had a mentor or program. So back in 2010, we established this committee, and the committee decided that we needed to have a program that we would pair in the state, which is very interesting, mentors and mentees from different organizations. Because like myself, I stayed in the same organization. And there's great value in that, but there's value in having a mentor from outside. I mentioned Linda Rush, my chief nursing officer. That was my mentor, but I was able to be paired as one of the first pairings and the program at ONL with a CNO from another hospital. And it gives you such a different perspective. This program that we established has evolved over the many years. We still do a cohort every 18 months. There's a workshop because we realize that people sometimes don't know what mentorship is. They get it confused with precepting or coaching. So we have a workshop to establish that education. Then we created a toolkit, and in the toolkit has all of the phases. There's the orientation phase, there's the working phase, and then there's the separation phase when the formal mentorship is over in that year. Sometimes that phase goes on for a long period of time, but other times it's okay. It just ends and your year connection is ended. So with ONL, we have this program that we do the education, we have the toolkit to support the relationship, and this toolkit gives you tangible, actionable steps to be able to go over that year journey with your mentor-mentee relationship. And it is probably one of the biggest gifts that I have had. And now I get to give back. So I'm a mentor. I'm currently mentoring somebody at another organization, a nurse manager who wants to become a chief nursing officer. That chief nursing officer is not worried that I'm going to try to get her to come work at Hunterdon. She's just so grateful that I'm sharing my experiences and that I can mentor her. And I feel like I'm giving back and that I grow and learn. Once a month, we get together, we meet in person, and I'm meeting with her actually on May 30th. I'm so excited because I look forward to just connecting. It is so wonderful to share, your experiences, especially being a nurse for 36 years. And it's just a wonderful program.
I'm going to ask if you don't mind for you to plug if a nurse is listening to this podcast and wants to get involved, who qualifies and where could they find that information?
Oh, absolutely. So you have to be a member of the Organization of Nurse Leaders in New Jersey to be paired in the next cohort, which will be coming in 2025. So in 2024, we have a cohort going. Beginning of 2025, we'll send out the workshop that I mentioned, and that could be for non-members. You can obtain the information about mentorship from that workshop. If you decide that you want to be paired in a cohort, that's when you have to join the organization. And what we find is after that workshop, people want to be paired. And then that helps with our membership. And we're up to almost 600 members in our organization in New Jersey, which is the strongest, largest membership for nurse leaders.
That's amazing. And is there a website online that people could find this information on?
Absolutely. So it's the website. If you go to and Google Organization of Nurse Leaders New Jersey, you'll find our homepage and you can find all the information about our mentorship program. I also might add, if you don't mind, that the toolkit that I mentioned is there free for members. But if you're not a member, you can obtain that toolkit and use it in your organization or personally for a nominal fee of $100.
An amazing resource. And is any nurse who is a member eligible to be mentored, or do you have to be, for example, looking to be a nurse leader as like a CNO, or could you be a bedside nurse who's not in that track yet or still considering that track?
That's a fantastic question. And really, you should be mentored at any level, right? Everybody should have a mentor and can benefit, whether it's CNO to CNO, a new CNO to an experienced CNO. If you want to remain at the bedside, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But you're a leader at the bedside and you still need a mentor. So what we do after the educational session, there's an application and you fill it out with your resume and you tell us what you're looking for. Maybe you're not looking to go to the next level. Maybe you're looking to learn more about advocacy. It could be regulatory. So then we find somebody in our almost 600 membership of an individual that has those skills and that expertise. So we can pair you so you can grow and develop whatever it is you're trying to develop. So we have lots of individuals in this current cohort of ours. It's our 8th cohort that are not paired with somebody at a higher level because they're not aspiring to move up, but they just want to learn maybe more, like I said, about advocacy or finance. That's one of the big things that we see that people would like to be mentored in. We don't, as nurses, get a lot of background in school, the finances, and we know, unfortunately, healthcare is a business, right? So even though what we do is so noble and impactful, but we have to be fiscally responsible. So a lot of our members and a lot of people that attend that session, they are looking for more information on finance. So we're able to pair them with members in our organization to grow that skill set and mentor them through a year process.
And what a creative thought, because it's true, there's so many aspects, even outside of just leadership development or skills development, that we can learn from each other. So after doing 8 years of this cohort, and I'm sure mentorship in many other ways throughout your career, do you have any advice for somebody who's looking to be a mentee? What kind of mindset they can come in with, or how can they most get the most amount of value out of the relationship that they develop with their mentor?
I think the first thing is to realize that it's a commitment of time, right? On both ends. The mentor is giving up time and investing in that mentee, and that mentee needs to be invested as well. So to make the most use of the time, and in the toolkit, it actually has this structure, you should establish goals. So in the beginning, what is it that you want to accomplish? And then check in each month. Are we meeting those goals? And in between those in-person meetings, being able to have that connection to just reach out, that phone the friend and build on that. So I think that's probably the most critical piece, that people need to understand that it is work. And you have to be in the right frame of mind. If you don't have time for whatever reason, listen, we all have points in our lives that we just have too much on our plate. It's an investment in yourself and in your future, but maybe this year isn't a good time. Maybe there's personal stuff. Maybe you have a family obligation, because you really want to make sure that you're invested and that you have the time to commit for the mentor and the mentee.
That makes perfect sense. And actually, for those who are considering mentoring, or those who are seasoned nurses who are looking to give back to their community, do you have any thoughts or recommendations for them?
So I think that it's going in with it eyes wide open, right? I recall the first time that we had this workshop. And people that are like myself that have been nursing for a long time, we had the thought process that we don't need to be mentored. And I think the reality is that you do. And I mentioned this in the beginning, that I think I get more out of my meetings with my mentee than she gets out of from me. Like, it inspires me, it energizes me, it reminds me of why I love nursing, and I think it makes me a better leader. So that would be the advice, that I would give, is just to remember that even if you've been in this profession a very long time, there's always opportunity to learn, to grow, to develop, and that you get value, when you give back.
Pay it forward 100%. And if there are nurses who are listening who are in that seasoned category who want to be able to give back, is there a way for them to link into ONL and share their experiences as a mentor? Is that something they could find on the website as well?
Absolutely. So we look for that depository, or repository, I should say, with our membership, so we can make sure that we have that robustness. So, we don't want to have all just CNOs, right? First of all, that would be boring. And then secondly, it really wouldn't meet the needs for the state and for our nurses, because as I mentioned before, nurses are leaders at all levels, right? At the bedside, we're leaders of our care team. We are in charge of the patient and the care team that's providing that care. So I think that's important.
And the structure, the community around ONL sounds like it's such a powerful force in itself. Would you have anything that you'd like to share about just what it means to be a member and how you can grow through membership?
It was the biggest gift for me, that CNO back in 2010, bringing me to that meeting, because especially in this role, there's only one of me here, right? So I have now 65 other CNOs in the state. I can phone a friend. And here's the one thing, Jersey gets a bad rap, right? We're a little tough. But the reality is our hearts are bigger than any other state. And I will tell you, though our CEOs wouldn't like to hear this, we phone a friend. I will share any policy. Any of my CNOs would share any policy. I know we compete for patients, for population, for market share, all of that. We never, ever enter that into any discussion, because we put the patient first. And that's why the CNOs will all share and have no problems sharing any best practices. That's what helps us grow. And that's what helps us provide the best care. And that's why the state of New Jersey is one of the highest magnet states, right? It's one of the highest leapfrog A states. Our quality, when you think about it, and it's because we look at the evidence, we work together, and we share. We steal from each other openly, and then we share. It's amazing. And this organization connected me with people that I would have never met in my little world, and I would have been just this leader with not that big perspective and not having any friends. They're all my mentors and friends. I'm very blessed. And that's what I would say. My team, a lot of my nurse leaders are members, and they love it because they'll call an OR director, from a competing organization. And for example, and then they share what they're doing for, let's say, joint patients and what kind of pain management are you offering and how are you addressing, like during the pandemic. Oh my goodness. Talk about things that we shared. Like, what are you doing, to get more masks or for PPE or, for visitors. And I could give so many examples. I could talk forever. I apologize. I'm very passionate about being a nurse. If I had to do it all over again and pick my career, I would always be a nurse.
That is just such a joy to hear because I really do believe that leadership comes 100% from the top, like the joy, the enthusiasm, the support. And to hear even at the level of a CNO, and you are the only one in your organization at your level, to be able to still hear that there is that network available, there is that community available, that as aspiring nurses, aspiring CNOs look to that. It's not a lonely journey. It doesn't have to be a lonely journey. Anybody has the ability to reach out and connect. And through organizations like ONL, have the ability to better each other and better the community and the practice that nursing has for all people involved, for patients, for nurses, for the entire state of New Jersey. So, I mean, what a beautiful sentiment that you're sharing. And because you're linked in with these other 65 CNOs, the CNOs around the state, do you as a community also have discussions about what it means to be, now you're the one in that room looking at those nurses standing up saying, this is the next generation. What are you guys thinking about? What is it that you're talking about in preparation for the next generation of nursing leaders?
Really is focusing on that development, right? And making sure that our organizations have that infrastructure to develop our leaders and that we support them going out to conferences, going back to school, encouraging them. As I mentioned before, even if someone remains at the bedside, you still need to grow and develop. And one of the other things that I wanted to just mention is sometimes people like myself, when I was approached to go into leadership, I loved being a bedside nurse. I didn't want to give up my patients. What I found, that joy and that fulfillment of that direct patient care, taking care of my patients, I have now watching my staff grow and develop. I think if I had a little bit to do with a candy striper that I taught to make a bed is now a director, at all those little moments, you're so proud, right? And so that joy that I had as a bedside nurse caring for a patient, I have that same level of joy watching my staff grow and develop. In a few short minutes, I will be going for Nurses Week down for our annual award ceremony. And I am beyond excited to see all of my nurses and the recognition. And a lot of these nurses, some of the awards that they're getting, just seeing how if I had a little bit to do with that development to get them to the point that they're getting that award and that we established a culture where they could thrive in an environment, wow. I mean, my day is perfect.
MaryJo, that is such a phenomenal perspective because really, like, it's shepherding an entire community, an entire health system's worth of nurses into the best version of what their practice can be. And that's just a reach that you wouldn't be able to have from any other vantage point. So that's just amazing.
We can reinvent ourselves time and time again, right? It's that flexibility, right? But it's also, we don't have to stay in, one role, you can just reinvent yourself almost every day, every week, it's wonderful. We pivot, we change. I love it.
And actually, coming from that thought, would you have anything to share for nurses who are maybe, we talked a little bit about early career nurses, we talked about our seasoned nurses. What about nurses who are in that transition stage in the middle of their career? Do you have any thought for nurses who are, kind of figuring out, again, at this stage, where they are and where they want to be?
Don't be stagnant. I honestly, and I'm going to be totally transparent because I think by now you could kind of sense that from me, right? I had no aspirations to go back to school for my DNP, but I wanted to be the chief nursing officer. And that really is starting to be a requirement, right? Though I've been in the organization a long time, I wasn't sure, they knew me. So, and I was the heir apparent that for the CNO that was leaving. But then I thought, I never want to not get this job that I feel like, I worked for because I didn't have the degree. I went back to school thinking, I've been in leadership for 20 something years. What am I going to learn? I can't tell you how wrong I was. And it was my lesson learned. And that's what I would say. Don't be stagnant. Don't think you know it all, or you don't need to go back to school, or you don't need to obtain another certification or whatever. Continue to grow, right? And continue to challenge and look at things differently. You know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome, right? And so like, I love to try new things. And some things we might say, well, that was stupid, right? And then other times we go, oh, I think this is stupid. And it works. So when you're in your career for a long period of time, don't fall back on the status quo and keep pushing yourself. And don't become complacent and think, oh, I know enough, or because that's not the case. And I think the other thing too is to be respectful to the multi-generations. Sometimes right, wrong, or indifferent, my generation were workhorses, right? This new generation, work-life balance. I don't think we were right. I think you need work-life, they actually call it effectiveness, right? It's not that you never get balanced. But so I tell my seasoned nurses that are, in the middle of their career, we weren't right. We were a product of how we grew up, but you need to embrace the new generations, the new thought processes. And like I said, don't keep doing things the same way and expect a different outcome.
That actually is one of the questions. You just led right into one of the questions we love to ask our nurses on the podcast, which is, in such a caring profession, we have to go back and take care of ourselves. That's literally part of making sure your cup is filled so that you can go back and give back. So what is it that you do, especially at a CNO level? What is it that you do to make sure that your own cup is full? How do you take care of yourself?
So I love my children, my family. So spending time with them, traveling. I think the biggest thing is self-reflection at the end of the day. I had to learn that the job's never done. When you're a staff nurse, you hand that baton over to somebody else, right? And you finish all of the things. In this role, the work's always going to be there. And I had to change my mindset of, at the end of the day, not all the things that I didn't get done, like, not enough time in the day. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I didn't do this. Now I changed my mindset to say, what did I accomplish today? And that takes that lift and that feeling of the stress and taking care of myself and recognizing and rewarding myself for doing a good job, instead of that Catholic guilt, that old saying, because that you beat yourself up. And I think that can be translated to the staff nurse as well. At the end of the day, sometimes they feel like they might have been able to provide better care. They wish they could have. They wish they had more time. Don't do that to yourself. Take a step back and realize the things that you did do that day and that you were able to accomplish. I think that keeps us healthy. I think that keeps our mind and keeps us to be able to be resilient and to not burn out.
What you're talking about, MaryJo, you were talking about how coming through the process of getting up to a CNO level, that you weren't necessarily taught all of these things, handed down all of the managerial aspects, the leadership skills, because you were starting off from a bedside position. From your experience, could you share with us what prepared you best to become a CNO?
So I think, they go back to nature or nurture. And so is it just inherent, which I always was a natural leader, right? From the time I was little, I always wanted to lead. And so I think that there's a piece of that, but a lot of it is really taking the opportunity to listen. And as I mentioned before, like going back to school and learning. When I started in my career, sometimes discussions would happen and it didn't have to do with nursing. And I would see some of my colleagues start to doodle. We didn't have phones back then, right? And not listening. And I would hear things and I'd be like, oh, I don't know what that is, right? And then I would go look it up. So let's say it was like case mix index. Like there's all these terms in healthcare, and you just have to take the opportunity and listen. And then you self-teach yourself, right? You look things up. You have that mentor, that person that you could say, I don't want to sound stupid in the meeting, but what were they talking about, right? What does that mean? And this generation, you guys, you can just Google it, right? You have, you don't have to go to the library and, take a book out, right? And so I think that really is important. And I think that for my recommendation and its success is you need to have a little bit of both. You have to have some of that natural ability, to read the room and to just take control and whatnot. But then you also have to have the ability to let somebody else, right? So my motto is always lead, follow, or just get out of the way, right? I don't mind, being led, and I love when people follow me, but you just can't stand there and not want to do anything, right? You got to be part of the solution.
That's exactly it, being part of the solution. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Nursing Insights podcast.
This podcast is brought to you by the New Jersey Collaborating Center for Nursing and the Rutgers School of Communication and Information.